Greetings, loyalists and heretics. Welcome to Iron and Ceremony, where we once again enter the war without an astropath.
So, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Iron and Ceremony podcast. I'm John, and as always, I'm joined by Glenn.
Evening.
Dave.
Hello.
Tom.
Oh!
Very good intro for today's episode. Shane, can you top that?
No, and I'm not even going to try.
Cool. Right. So thanks for coming back. If you haven't already, go back and watch the last episode, which is the first half of this episode, I guess, to make it confusing for you all. As I explained in the last episode, we're still doing our podcast as normal. We're doing it in one sitting. But just to split it up, we'll be releasing the hobby roundup on a Monday and the second part of the episode on a Friday. And if you haven't guessed, or if you don't remember from the last episode, we're talking about Space Wolves this week. So thanks for sticking with us and coming back. And Shane's going to take us through a bit of a guided tour of all things furry.
Indeed, yes. As the resident Space Wolf player at the moment, but not necessarily expert. I know, Glenn, you've played with the wolves before, and have a fair few models. And I think Dave, weren't you at some point also tempted by the wolves?
Teetering on the brink of having Space Wolves as my first army.
Everybody's got to be tempted. Like when you're first discovering and looking for all the different legions, Space Wolves is definitely one of the ones where they stand out, regardless, don't they?
They're a little bit different to most of the other. Well, as I said, on the surface, they're a little bit different. So they, as you said, they stand out quite a lot to the rest of the chapters. But actually, like every chapter's got its own, unique story. And I think as time's gone, that's why like Black Templars are coming into popularity right now. Blood Angels are always a firm favourite. The Dark Angels are always there or thereabouts. Ultramarines, maybe not quite as much, but every chapter's got its place, right? And they all started in the same place, of course, back on Terra, and the Space Wolves were the 6th Legion, and back then, so when would it be? Just post unification, whereas other legions they draw their recruits or their neophytes from certain locations, or originally on Terra they did, so they'd be from a certain tribe or areas of warriors. The 6th Legion at the time, they drew their warriors across from everywhere. It was more about the warriors' skill and viciousness that really sort of drew them into that legion. And that's where I think it was during that time and a bit afterwards that they got the name the Rout. Because they were known for charging in after their enemies, and just pursuing them in the same way that carrion creatures would, so jackals and things like that of old Earth, as it were. And at the time, they drew unfavourable comparisons with what was the Warhounds Legion at the time, which later went on to be the World Eaters, I believe. And at the time, they were the Warhounds were seen as the decisive, aggressive, and sort of elite hunters, whereas the Rout or the 6 were the type that had a reputation of only being brave when their enemy was running or not able to defend themselves, and a lot of commanders looked upon them as maybe almost uncontrollable, and so they drew comparisons with the Warhounds, and that obviously, as we know, as the heresy unfolded, that kind of changed. And actually, the fortunes of both legions changed when their Primarchs were found. So for the Warhounds, potentially for the worse, and for the Rout or the 6, who would then later become the Space Wolves, for the better. And so that's kind of their origins on Terra and where they came from. In terms of there's always been a bit of mystery in terms of the gene seed and the origin in that regard, because and it's come out more recently in the lore with Belisarius Cawl and his experimentation with the gene seed, but it became apparent that the flaws in the gene seed of certain chapters were placed there by the Emperor, by his design, because Belisarius was told, if the Emperor put it there, you can't remove it, can't get rid of it. Which is why things like the red first, which is the Blood Angel's flaw, is still present, and has come to the fore again in the Primaris, and the Canis helix in the Space Wolf's gene seed is present, and it was also, they were one of three chapters, the Treefoil, that were kind of created slightly differently to the other 20. So it was the six, the Salamanders, and the Alpha Legion, who were all created slightly differently in design to the other chapters for different purposes, which have been speculated but never confirmed. So, they always talk about the wolves being like the Emperor's executioners, and being a particular tool, and likewise for the Salamanders with in the main part their empathy and humanity intact as a chapter, and then obviously the Alpha Legion as a very different chapter altogether. But there is conjecture around whether the Space Wolves were ever the Emperor's executioners, and whether that was just something that a moniker that they earned. That's fine. So they're obviously that they are known as the Treefoil, Treefoil chapters. So 3 specific chapters created slightly differently by the Emperor and his gene rights, but with a lot of them. Well, in a lot of cases, a lot of the chapters obviously suffered a little bit until they found their Primarchs and were able to, in some cases, stabilize with the purer gene seed. And one of the as well as the Canis helix itself, as part of the Space Wolves gene seed, before they found Russ, so Leman Russ, the Primarch, the actual death rate for neophytes, for new inductees into the Legion, to the Six, was very high. It was a very difficult gene seed to take, and so they actually, by the time the Crusade started, they were about a fourth, so a quarter of the size of other chapters, like the Dark Angels, like the Ultramarines, and so they tended to be deployed alongside other chapters, or other legions, as opposed to being their own crusade force, at least until they found Russ, because they couldn't grow in number as the other chapters the other legions were, because the gene seed was so hard to take.
Why is that?
Well, it was because of the Canis helix. So that's the actual element of the gene seed that a Space Wolf neophyte has to overcome. And it's where you have effectively the Wolfen, or Wolfen, depending on how you want to call it, that are now part of the actual playable unit, which it never used to be back when they first started. They are either members of the 13th company, which was lost in the Eye of Terror, or those neophytes that succumb to the curse of the Wolfen. And that is where their animalistic side effectively kicks in, and they wolf out to, as werewolves with frag launchers and frost blades, effectively. But
on that, Shane, just with the difference between the 13th Legion and the Wolfen that's come to the curse. So is the 13th Legion come back and they sort of they've got the curse, but they're able to control it better, or what's the difference between the two? The
13th company, they were lost in the warp, so in the Eye of Terror, and then I think it was during the War of the Beast, where effectively Ragnar crossed the Rubicon. They were rediscovered and found that actually outside of battle they were they had enough sense that you could actually talk with them, discuss things, and that they were a battle unit again. They were able to be part of the chapter itself, and that itself has led to a lot of a lot of vigilance over the Space Wolves, because there's a lot that there's a lot going on with the chapter itself that is potentially, on the verge, if not fully heretical, including actions that they've done in the past, weapons that they actually have, and then things like having the Wolfen, which if you go back to like heresy times, one of the reasons that Magnus and Lehman Russ fell out so much was not only obviously all to do with psychers, which we'll come into as well, but also to do with the flesh change that was rampant in the Thousand Sons, and obviously at the time, Lehman particularly would not hesitate in killing any Thousand Son that fell to the flesh change. One in particular, right in front of Magnus, which led to them. Or to them, or Lehman Russ himself saying that there would be a day of reckoning for him and Magnus. Wouldn't be that day, but there would be a day. So it's interesting that the Wolven themselves are now actually part of the chapter and seen as part of it. They are regarded by the Wolf priests as still lineage of Russ, and as a portent that the wolf time is coming. I'll come into what the wolf time is. That's like one of the the traditions, one of the parts of the chapter to do with when Lehman Russ will return, and the wolf time is a bit like Ragnarok. It's like the end of times for the chapter itself, and it's regarded as the time when Lehman Russ himself will return to lead the chapter in the final battle, and the Wolfen are regarded by the wolf priest as important that this time is coming, that Russ will return, and that the wolf time will be upon the Imperium.
So do they wait? So if you're going to cover it, sorry, do they start accepting the Wolfen as their own after Russ went? Because obviously he's off in the warp at the minute doing whatever he's doing. So were they being inducted as soldiers before or after?
Yeah, so the neophytes or space marines. So one of the things with the Canis Helix is if you're able to suppress the beast, as it were, and keep it under control, you're then inducted into the chapter, and you start off. So we'll go into the structure a little bit, but you start off as a Bloodclaw, which are effectively they're assault marines, but the way that the Space Wolves lead or chapter structure differs is that they have packs, and you will progress with your pack mates throughout the chapter. So as you get older, you'll go from being a Bloodclaw to a Grey Hunter, and then from there progress in the same way. So rather than in other chapters where you might move around depending on your specialty, you will stay with your same pack mates throughout your time fighting, and you start off. So the neophytes that succeed in resisting the curse of the Wolfen, and I think it's going through it's a Morkai's Gate, I think they call it. But effectively, what happens is you enter into the Blood Claws at that point with the rest of your pack, and they are hot-headed, aggressive, all looking to write their own sagas and fight the biggest enemies. Tabletop wise, it can be a bit of a pain, because it means that if you have a Bloodclaw pack and they charge, you have to charge the closest enemy unit. You don't get to pick who they are unless you've got a Wolf Guard leading them. So you can have a Wolf Guard unit, like a Wolf Guard miniature, leading a Bloodclaw pack to try and calm their tempers and stabilize them. But if you don't have that Wolf Guard in there, then they will always charge the closest enemy unit, sort of indicating their kind of headstrong ferocity. And because the Space Wolves don't adhere to the Codex Astartes at all, really. Like, I mean, they do to a small degree, but they always have their own equivalent things. They have pack markings, so the Bloodclaws will have yellow and red on one of their shoulder pauldrons. So on one shoulder pauldron, you have the mark of your company. So the black and yellow that we see quite often, you can see in the picture behind me, that's Ragnar's great company. So Ragnar Blackmane's company sigil. And then on the other pauldron, you would have your pack marking. And if you're a Bloodclaw, it's yellow and red. And then as you progress, you become, as I said, a Grey Hunter, which means you're a bit older. You're fiery hair, gingery hair will go a bit grayer in color, and that's you get a bit older, so you become a grey hunter. And in that case, your pack marking will change from yellow and red to black and yellow, I believe. Black and yellow, I think. I'd have to look that one up to be sure. But you change into what is effectively a tactical squad. So Grey Hunters are the tactical squad of the Space Wolves. And then as you keep growing, you then become a Long Fang. And the reason it's called Long Fangs is that the Canis Helix is always developing a Space Wolf. And so as their hair gets longer, coarser, and all that, their fangs grow as well, which is why you have Long Fangs. So old Space Wolves have got long canines that have developed over the years, and they are, the most trusted and experienced. And typically they'll be given the heavy weapons. So Long Fangs are the equivalent of your Devastator squad. And then finally, you will then also have your Wolf Guard. And Wolf Guard are picked from any pack at any point, depending on whether they've shown, deeds of great bravery and honor. And they will be invited to join the Wolf Guard of whichever Wolf Lord they served, and that depends which company you're a part of. And you will join as either a Wolf Guard that could just be in standard power armor, leading a Bloodclaw pack, or you could be a Wolf Guard granted a Wolf Guard Terminator, so given Terminator armor, and that's effectively the Wolf Guard will serve as the Terminator squad for a Space Wolves player. You also have things like Sky Claws, so they're your assault marines with jump packs, and again, Sky Claws are just Blood Claws, but they're they're even more headstrong than the guys on foot, because they've been given jump packs to get into the enemy. They're even more keen to get into a fight, and so as I said, they have their own subtle names, but that's, as I said, they are effectively just assault marines with jump packs. And then there are a few other nuances in terms of how the chapter differs. So there's no, I said there are psychers, but they're not called psychers, they're rune priests. Because the Space Wolves, this is one of the contradictory things about the Space Wolves. Lehman Russ didn't like psychers, he was not a fan of psychers. And in the Edict of Nicaea, which happened in the Heresy, and John, just, light spoilers here.
That's fine.
This is where obviously the use of librarians was put on hold and banned by the Emperor, but that didn't include rune priests or the White Scars Storm priests. So they're both very similar in how they operate in terms of what they are. They are effectively psychers, but they're more, I suppose, shamanistic in terms of how their power manifests, and they call them in various books and stuff like that weird speakers, so WYRD. So it's very much old school shamanistic type approaches that they are. They're not psychers, they're not librarians, they are they're sort of natural shamans that use the elements and harness warp powers in that regard to use the immaterium to their benefit. And I think that there's always a comment about it, but there's no rune priest. So whereas you have librarians in other chapters that have fallen to chaos, no rune priest has ever fallen. And the Space Wolves themselves, although I think there's only one unit at the moment that has any kind of anti-psyker. There's a psyker hunter unit now in 9th edition, which is the Reaver squad. So it's a specific squad that you could take. So you could take Reavers as a Space Wolf player, or you could take the Hounds of Morkai, and they are a specific squad of psyker hunters, because the Space Wolves have this kind of distrust for not librarians, but psychers as well. And the only ones they accept are their rune priests. And then, so you've got those guys. Then you've got the Wolf priests. So the Wolf priests are a cross between the chaplains and apothecaries. So in another chapter, you might have a chaplain and an apothecary. In the Space Wolves list, you would only have a Wolf priest. A famous, the most famous one is Ulrich the Slayer. So he's, a storied character. He's been around for many years. Like he knows Logan Grimnar quite well. Also bought Ragnar Blackmane through the chapter as well. His original model is obviously a younger man. Now his newer model, I don't think he's crossed the Rubicon yet, but his newer model is him as a slightly older, bearded wolf priest. But effectively, they do the same job as a chaplain or an apothecary. So they will have their litanies of battle. They'll have their bits and pieces that they use to urge the wolves on. But they'll also retrieve the Canis helix and the progenoid glands of the fallen as they fall in battle, so that they can continue harvesting the gene seed once they've moved on.
So tabletop wise, are they quite expensive then? I'm assuming they've got, like you say, both litanies and obviously the apothecary side, so they can heal, or not? They can't do the apothecary bit.
No. So in terms of the lore, that's what they do, but in terms of tabletop, it's very much just the chaplain rules.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Do they not still come with what was it? It used to be called like healing salve or healing bombs or something like that in previous codex? Do they not have that anymore at all?
I don't think Ulrich does, but I think maybe a standard priest might do. But for character rules, Ulrich doesn't.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. So that's the wolf priest role, and then of course you've then got the wolf lord. Actually, I'll stop. That before we get into that, the only other one is the tech priests, which are very similar to tech marines, but they've just got a few wolf tails and stuff like that added onto the model. They're not too dissimilar to tech marines, but they are still a different unit to your standard tech marine. So they're called tech priests because it's space wolves and everything's a priest as opposed to anything else. So that's the only difference there, really. They run the forges on Fenris up in Asserheim, and they run the same as your standard tech marine. And then finally, you've got your wolf lords, which run each of the great companies, of which there are 12 active, and then there's the lost 13th, which is what's just coming back through the Wolfen now. And they are all ruled by their own wolf lord, and they all have their own kind of flaw in the fang that is their own domain, depending on how they like to operate. And obviously, the great wolf is leads the first company, and at the moment that's Logan Grimnar. Who again has been around for many years now. He's got one of the maddest models you can get on tabletop, with a little chariot hovering chariot drawn by thunder wolves, and this big flowing beard. I think there is somewhere. I think GW did actually paint it up, so he looked like Father Christmas at one point for Christmas period.
So versions of that.
Yeah, it's the most ridiculous space wolf model, like you can imagine. But which is a shame, because I think Logan Grimnar deserves a better model than that. But it is very space wolfy.
Can you still have him on foot without the chariot?
You can have him on foot. As a model, you can just have him on foot, but I don't know whether the model's still in production.
Surely you could just lop him off the chariot.
You probably could do.
Probably build him on a nice base without the chariot.
Yeah.
Because a couple of editions ago, when that model first came out, chariots were amazing. The Necron one was brilliant, so they had to it was the thing to get into every army was chariot. So yeah, that was the Space Force one. Didn't look, but it's effective.
Yeah, fair enough. They went very OTT on it. It's very Nordic, very chariot that looks like the front of a Viking longship, that floats, that's dragged by massive wolves. It's very space wolf. But what's interesting for me, he carries a what would be in any other chapter a heretical weapon. So it's a cornate axe, So from I believe from a demon, and he wields that, and that would in many other cases be heretical. And there have been a lot of instances where, as I said, the wolves have clashed with the powers that be in the Imperium. So we go back a little bit to recap on the history. We'd got up to the point where we were talking about the Canis Helix and how difficult the neophytes were until they found Russ. And obviously, he wasn't the first to be found, but he was. I think he might have even been second or third. Sorry.
I think it was the second.
Yeah, it was relatively early on. Yeah.
Hang on, what's going on? Dave's bringing up a useful point. What's happening?
He did. He did very, very well done.
Hey, Tom, really, have you not been listening? You're just shocked.
Thanks, mate.
So, yeah, as Dave rightly pointed out, it's found second, and the emperor obviously it came to the halls of Russ, and recognized him as his son, and had to chat, knew he would have to challenge him, and that they started off with an eating competition, so see how much they could eat, and by the time I think the emperor had finished his first big plate, Russ had already eaten 2 aurochs, which are like buffalo type animals. So he'd smashed down 2 of those in the time the emperor had taken to eat like a big plate. And then he said, right, all right, well, I've beaten you there, so now we're going to have a drinking competition. And again, before he'd even finished his like first flagon of mead or whatever it was, Russ had done 2 barrels. And then it was like, right, okay, well now we'll have a fight. And it was especially at that point, I think the emperor called him a drunk and a glutton, and then cast his cloak off, and obviously he's in this burnished gold power armor. And so Russ was like, all right, well we'll have a bit of a ding dong, and then the emperor bested him, and at that point it was Russ never looked back and said, yeah, this is the emperor, and his loyalty to him never faltered after.
Didn't the emperor knock him clean out?
Yeah,
for like a couple of days.
For days as well, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he regained consciousness. A couple like a day later or something like that. It was.
He literally knocked the sense into him.
Yes, very very entertaining. Very Russ in terms of his character arc, in that he liked fighting and drinking, and he at that point he professed like loyalty to the emperor, and that was never going to change for him. And it was also then finding the Primarch that then allowed them to stabilize the rest of the 6th Legion and use Fenris, which is Deathweld, as the recruiting ground. Now there were jumping forward a little bit, we'll jump about a bit here. When the Codex Astartes came in and they split the legions, the Space Wolves split in 2. So it was you still had the Space Wolves and you had the Wolf Brothers. I think they were called the Wolf Brothers, but unfortunately, they destabilized. Their gene seed destabilized, and they had to be disbanded because they're just controllable mutations and
disbanded as in, or
so they were effectively all gone. The chapter was chapter was wiped out, as it were. Some may have been reinducted into the Space Wolves and rejoined because, as I said, they're not Codex compliant, so there may be more than 1,000 of them. It's never really been a head count.
There definitely is.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I mean,
well, apart from the fact they've got 12 companies.
12 companies. Yeah.
Basic maths says there's at least a couple of hundred extra guys, but each company fluctuates as well.
Yeah. And then the only other one that's come into more recent lore is the Wolvespear, which is a successor chapter that you don't really hear much from in too much detail. It is in the latest codex, but it only gets a very little snippet, and they are a fleet-based chapter that are apparently born of the lineage of Russ, and they're really the only chapters that now exist in the lore, as it were, for the wolves. So going back to that point, the chapter's founding, the stabilization of the gene seed through Russ, and then obviously we get into his role as or the perceived role as the executioner, as the axe blade to keep people honest, as it's been described, and it comes from the fact obviously they were still a small legion at the time in comparison to others, and they never really fought too far away from the Emperor's side to begin with, apart from when the heresy really kicked in and they found themselves in a bit too far away from Terra to get back in time for the final battle between Horus and the Emperor. But during the heresy, there was a few interesting different bits and pieces that happened. So he was sent to become Angron at one point, and he actually tried to talk sense into Angron. This was just pre-heresy, and actually, unsurprisingly, surprisingly for Russ, he didn't engage with the World Eaters, or the Warhounds. He realised how senseless it would be for them to fight, because it would just be, two armies of equal martial prowess just obliterating each other to the point where none existed. So he actually didn't pursue that fight, but he did try and chastise Angron for his behaviour at the time, and that kind of keyed the difference between the wolves and the World Eaters in terms of their different paths once their primarchs were found. He also had a bit of obviously a well documented spat with Magnus, and that led to obviously the raising of Prospero, which, spoiler alert, John, that happens not a couple of books on, but was obviously one of the pivotal parts of the heresy in terms of the ongoing and long feud between the Space Wolves and the Thousand Suns. And then I think other notable rivalries with the Dark Angels, which is more of a begrudging rivalry, as it started on one of the Crusades, one of the compliances, and both the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves were there, and Russ felt he'd been his honor had been insulted by the rival warlord or the lead, the general, whoever it was, the leader of the compliance they were trying to take down. He fought his way to the palace, ready to kick the door in and regain his honor. And as he did so, he found Lionel L. Johnson there, just literally decapitating the general that he wanted to regain his honor with. So he felt that his honor had been besmirched, not only by the guy he was trying to kill, but also then by Lionel not giving him the option to actually take his honor back. And so the two of them got into a fight, and were fighting for about a day, just knocking punches and knocking lumps out of each other. And then Russ at one point sort of, took a breath and just started laughing, realizing the futility of it, that they couldn't keep fighting. It was not going to go anywhere. But Lionel Johnson took that as an insult, and so smacked him, knocked him out. So it's the second time he's been knocked unconscious. This time, not for as long, just knocked him to his feet for a couple of minutes. But it was enough time that Lionel walked away in disgust, that Russ was laughing at him, but he misinterpreted it. It was not meant as that. It was more laughter about the fact that the futility of the fight. And then since then, it doesn't often end in death, that has done, but the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves will put forward champions to compete in a duel, just to test the honor of each chapter, and it's led to a begrudging respect between the two of them. And one of the theories of where Russ went when he went into the Eye of Terror was, and as I said, it's one of them, was that he may have been going in there to look for his old rival / friend Lionel Johnson in the warp. So that was one of the theories that was in the lore in terms of why Russ went into the Eye of Terror. Obviously, we now know, for those, again, spoiler alert, John, for those that don't know, obviously we know the Lion isn't in the warp, but Russ didn't know that at the time when that lore was written.
So they've changed that lore slightly because I thought once he started laughing at the lion decked him.
Yeah.
And he punches long enough that the Dark Angels had left the system before he came around.
I
So
think
he was out for like a couple of days.
I think it depends which one you read.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was from that might have been like the very, very old Angels of Death Codex.
Yeah.
You know, so Separation Codex. Plus told from a perspective. So yeah, days he was knocked out for.
He's got a bit of a glass jaw, isn't he?
I was going to say it's interesting.
Con.
It's a contradiction, is Russ, because he's one of the during the heresy he nearly took down Horus, like in one of the battles. He got himself in a bit of spot, but he nearly got a spear into him, but he didn't make the killing blow, which is the story of the heresy, right? Moments that could have gone one way but went another. So anyway, what happened for the rest of the heresy is obviously the wolves were trying to get back to Terra, were in a pretty bad state, and at one point their fleet was pretty much going to be at the mercy of I think it was the Thousand Suns, and it was the Alpha Legion. Sorry, it was the Alpha Legion. So they were at a point where the Alpha Legion were ready to effectively wipe out a depleted and struggling Space Wolves fleet, and the Dark Angels came in and actually saved them. So it's kind of the story of the two chapters is one of begrudging respect and kind of professional soldiery, as it were, even though they've had their disagreements, and that's gone on into more modern day, where the Dark Angels are still coming, and at one point were ready to effectively bombard and blow the Fang entirely away, believing that the wolves had fallen, and then finding out they hadn't, and it was all the machinations of Magnus and Zinch, who are always at play with the Space Wolves.
Just before you go on, there was a bit a minute ago, just taking it back a little bit. I don't know if it's a change in law or if it's just something I've read or looked at that was inaccurate, but I'm sure I heard it somewhere that Russ got beaten up by Angron too. In that scenario you just you did say about. But Russ's team that was with him, his soldiers that were with him, ended up surrounding the World Eaters and outskilling them in their maneuverability and having all of their guns aimed on Angron in the end. Is that something that's changed, or was that something you've just not heard of?
that was a different engagement.
Okay, cool.
But cool. No, I yes, I remember that one as well. I don't know where I've read that, but yeah, that was a different engagement. So
awesome.
Heresy.
Yeah.
Can't remember which one, but it's in one of the heresy books. Probably Thousand Suns or Prospero Burns, maybe one of those two. It's the most likely.
Yeah. That it said it is. Yeah, a different engagement, but
just going along with the theme of like him getting beaten up, basically. Just wanted to add that in there. Yeah,
he keeps putting himself in these positions. But because
he's drunk with a big mouth, isn't he? And can't follow through.
That's basically, yeah, pretty much. And I think, well, because of also the nature of the chapter, because they took themselves to Fenris, because they only recruit there, and because they didn't have any other sources of recruitment, they stayed relatively small and obviously kept themselves to themselves, which led to most other chapters not knowing how to take them, not knowing how to really deal with them. And actually across the lore you see a lot of instances of individual wolves, space wolves, like having friendships and allies within different chapters, but not, or legions, but not the chapter themselves being particularly friendly. And I think that's they seek out martial pride and excellence in other chapters, but it's kind of a distance that they keep, which is one of the reasons why in more of the modern day there's still an element of suspicion over what they do, some of their practices, and the fact that you're not allowed to approach Fenris, for example, without invitation. And if you do, they will obviously engage. It's very much and they keep themselves to themselves in a way that the current High Lords of Terror would prefer, or the Inquisition would prefer, would be slightly different. And they've had run-ins with the Inquisition previously as well, which has led to them and the Grey Knights having a bit of a bust up.
Huh.
I've got to say I read I think it's The Emperor's Gift by Aaron Dembski Bowden, and this is going to be a bit spoilery, but there you go. There's a part in that where they disagree with the Grey Knights heavily over the Grey Knights wanting to just destroy a whole group of Imperial Guard just because they've witnessed, I think it was Angron, the demon Primarch, Angron. And obviously the Space Wolves think they should be still protecting humanity. That's what they're there for. Yeah. And I know there's an encounter with Grimnar and one of the Grey Knight commanders, and Grimnar just absolutely ruins him completely. Yeah. And that's where you realise, like, the older a Space Marine gets, the stronger they get as well, don't they? Still, supposedly, or at least Grimnar does. And he literally just beheaded the guy like he was nothing. And we think that the Grey Knights are, the Emperor's genes, and they're above everyone else. But really, Grimnar just off with the head, and he was like, "See you later. I don't give a fuck who you are." And that just proves, there are a lot out there after them, against them, thinking that they're, heretical and all that. But yeah, that was an awesome book. If anyone's out there, read that book. That's amazing.
Yeah, they are very much a chapter that believes very much in what they're doing. They are, as you said, very much about protecting mankind, but more so it's loyalty to the Emperor. That's what drives them, and that's what their ultimate pieces. That none of them have, allegedly, none of them have fallen to chaos. None of them have been tempted by the warp and so on. How true that is, we never know. Like, the law will change and maneuver as required. Some would say they've already fallen, but there is obviously the one thing that they maintain is their loyalty to the Emperor and to Russ. I can't remember how often it is, but they obviously, every Wolf Lord will call, at least once anyway, the Great Hunt, which is where they will go into, or they will try and find the Lost Primarch. So they'll go and try and find him. That's actually how Bjorn ended up Bjorn the Fell-Handed ended up entombed in his dreadnought sarcophagus on one of the hunts in around the Eye of Terror. He got mortally wounded and so was entombed. Obviously, Bjorn, again, one of the big characters from 40k lore, oldest serving Astartes, even though he's in a dreadnought, and gets woken up like every now and then to tell the tale of Russ and how he was left behind, how he was part of the wolf. Well, he was the lone wolf guard of Russ that was left. And I talked about this when we talked about Bjorn in one of the other pods. Obviously, he was a lone wolf previously, so Russ knew he was able to cope with the loss, and left him to lead the wolves while he went in, took the rest of his wolf guard into the Eye of Terror, seeking various different things. Some say seeking something in Nurgle's garden that can bring the Emperor back to life. Others, saying he's gone to find the lion, or he's just gone to take out his demon brethren. But all we do know is, as I said, he did say, like, as he went, his dying words, as written somewhere, is that he will, no matter which state of death holds him, he will come back when his sons call, when the wolf time comes, which is obviously the a very strong analog for Ragnarok from Viking lore. Sorry,
or when GW fancies a bit of cash.
Well, I was going to say, and it's going to happen at some point, right? They're gonna roll it out at some point, and that will be, take all my money, have it all.
Are you going to be still at the door at midnight waiting for them to open up?
Well, I do. The side note, I do keep looking at the 30k Forge World model of Russ, and thinking, am I ever going to get it? Because I've got my little Rogue Trader version, so it might be nice to have both.
Yeah.
I want older, more haggard one. He's too young and youthful in the Forge World one.
This is true.
This is true. I see Ross, big fucking beard, hair all crazy. That dude looks way too handsome to be, a badass Space Wolf.
Yeah,
On a very quick tangent, so I watched Tabletop Titans. They did a Salamanders versus Death Guard video, and they made up some of their own rules. So they used Vulcan, the Forge World Vulcan, and I can't remember what rules they used, but they made basically, obviously, agreed some Forge World models, and they made some rules for him to make him a playable character.
Don't they just use the Forge World rules?
Is that a thing? Is it them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know Forge World characters cover rules because they said that they'd made some up to make him playable.
The Forge World ones are
yeah,
30k rules, aren't they?
Yeah, but they played a game
more
of
or less the same. Wouldn't take much tweaking to.
Yeah. So would you consider doing something similar with the Lehman Russ model that's already there, and maybe tweaking it for a 40k game, or would you just wait?
No, I like my narrative side of things, and like it would feel a bit weird. Although I can understand why making up rules would appeal to you, John. It's
Oh,
that's not no. I was just trying to say.
No, I know.
I was trying to help. Always turns back on me, doesn't it? It's because I'm the only chaos player.
No. As I said, I think
Right.
if they did bring out, if they did bring it out, then yeah, I'd buy one for the 40k. I think I'd like, I'd like them as a centerpiece model. It'd be one of the few models that I'd get that would just be a centerpiece. I have occasionally looked at 30k and been like, do I want to play this? Do I want another rule set? Do I want to build it? And because some of those old Marines, some of the Forge World models do look very cool. But as I said, it is a. I know it's a lot of the stuff is similar, but it is still a slightly different game system and slightly different rule books that you have to buy and stuff like that. So I'd be tempted, but I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what the tweaking was because I just remember they said like they'd made it for whatever rules they'd agreed so they could play at 40k. And they did a game with him. So yeah. But if you get me sarcastic about it, I'm going to rescind my offer, and you can just carry on talking about your furry animals.
I can't remember where I was. What was I up to? So yeah, Russ the Wolf time. Yeah, that's it. So Russ went into he upped sticks and went. And as I said, notable actions since then have been, we've already talked about it, like their the to do with the Inquisition and the Grey Knights over I can't remember whether it was to do with one of the Wars of Armageddon actually.
It was Third War of Armageddon.
There we go, Third War of
it would
Armageddon.
have been
Second one for the night, Dave.
Dave, correct there. It was the first because the third was Gazgul, the second was Gazgul.
The Secret War of Armageddon.
Know your shit.
So
We're all turning against each other. What's happened?
Then the other two just disagree.
So anyway, the Secret War of Armageddon. But yeah, that's where that falling out happened, and obviously that was probably one of the bigger ones that have cast the wolves at odds with the Imperium. And then since then, really, as I said, there's the odd bit of Magnus coming out of the warp to cause some problems, and then the Wolfen appearing as a portent of the end times. And I think more recently, as I said, I'm not up to all of the more recent lore, but obviously Ragnar Blackmane, youngest Wolf Lord to lead a great company, crossing the Rubicon Primaris after his fight with Gazgul. Speaking of Gazgul, when him and Gazgul got stuck into it as they released those new models for him. Was it it was 8th edition, wasn't it? So that was Saga of the Beast, I think. And you had the new Gazgul model as well as the new Ragnar Blackmane model, who tabletop wise is a bit of a glass hammer. He can hit really, really hard, but can't necessarily take a punch as well.
Just like Russ then.
A bit like Russ, yeah. I mean, speaking personally, I prefer taking Bjorn as the warlord, much to John's dismay.
I'm sure everyone else will feel his wrath soon enough.
Yeah,
he's a horrible model to play against.
He's very punchy. I tell you why you probably didn't like him is he's got lots of rules that are very similar to Nurgle.
Yeah.
So he's got like disgustingly resilient, but the equivalent in invulnerable saving throws, and he's got his reduced damage by 1 because he's a venerable dreadnought. So he can punch.
Yeah, you can.
But that's it. That's the potted history of the wolves and where we're up to. I don't know. I think
I have a question,
yes.
and it's I want to hear your interpretation of the answer.
Okay.
Are there wolves on Fenris? This is a very well-known, very debated thing that was sort of a throwaway line in one book, and it spawned a whole mess of crap on the internet.
So I believe the answer is there are no wolves on Fenris.
That is the correct answer, but why?
Because they're not. Well, the Fenrisian wolves are not wolves. But
So they're on altogether alien sort of
No,
alien
they're
sort of set of beasts, or they're what? Or are they space
alluded
wolves?
to in the books is they are basically field, well, not necessarily field, but they are the early settlements used gene manipulation to try and help them survive in the harsh world that they were in, and they've just developed from that. So that's why there's the human element to them.
Yeah.
It's also sort of like potentially alluded to that they are also field space wolves.
Yeah, the Wolfen.
Another potential option. So yeah, there's because I can't remember what book it's in, but somebody's fighting one of them, and they look into its eyes and they realize that there's a human soul looking out of the wolf, basically. So yeah, they're not
no wolves on Fenris.
Wolves.
That's quite interesting. I'd like to look into that. It's quite a cool little idea.
It's a bit of it's a throwaway derogatory bit of conversation from Magnus as well. He's just like, no, there's no wolves on Fenris. They're just all failed experiments, basically.
One of the good things about the lore, right, is that people will take a line and spin it into huge narratives and debate.
Oh man, the Games Workshop online community is phenomenal for that.
Yeah.
I just wish that there had been the same level of internet whenever that picture of the Emperor and Horus first came out with Sanguinius dead on the steps.
Yeah.
Because the whole like, oh, but the sword comes from behind and the armor's coming out from the front and he's got one single wound. Horus doesn't have a weapon that could do that. Yeah. Oh, I would love to have seen the internet just go mental when that picture first came out. And even now I'm like, yeah, Emperor killed. Yeah. Yeah, that's all I had from.
Fair enough. Dave, you want to take your revenge?
No. I'm gonna be nice. I think that was brilliant. I think that was very good. Very interesting.
Yeah, as I said, there's a lot more modern lore that I'm probably not as up to date on. But it's that's where they're up to pretty much.
No, it's good, man. It's very interesting.
Things in the sorry, Tom, to just cut over the top of you.
No, go on, Glenn. It's fine.
Yeah, was you anyway. There's a few units that because I don't have the current Space Wolf Codex. Do they still have things like lone wolves?
No, so that actually got taken out from from 8th edition because like as in when you get like a unit that's wiped down to one character and he one unit and one model and he can effectively become a character as a lone wolf. Yeah, that rule's not there anymore.
It was a little cheap character, lone elite guy. You could pretty much go, I'm going to give him whatever the hell I want. It would have been perfect for like Tom could have done an army of them because you could literally just stick whatever you wanted on and just be like, yeah, this is Dave. He's a lone wolf. He's got this and that and that. And this is Keith. He's another lone wolf and he's got this and this and this. And you could just completely go on the town and whatever you want. And they were all individual guys. Yeah. And they got like mini sagas So they were really good for running up and just. I had one that was just a random Terminator with a storm shield and a chain fist, and his main job was to just run at the biggest, scariest character and punch it till either it died or he died. And you used to get, you didn't lose victory points if your guy died, but you lost them if he was still alive at the end of the battle. Because
he's got to fulfill his saga.
You go and look for that glorious death, and if you didn't get him killed by the end of the game, you lost victory points.
Yeah,
it was a nice little touch.
I really liked it as a rule, but yeah, it's not in 9th edition anymore.
That's cool. I'd love to kit bash a few of them. That sounds amazing. I definitely wouldn't call them Dave and Keith being Space Wolves, but
well, you know, Dave started like a go-to name. Then I realized that we have a Dave, and that's really boring. So I thought I'd go for another really boring name and call him Keith.
Yeah. Sorry to all you Keiths.
How many Glens do you know?
Too many.
One's too many. Yeah, definitely.
Leave Dave alone. He's an iron and ceramite treasure.
Yes, indeed.
Well, he's special anyway.
Right.
The no-eared relic.
Cool. So, has anyone got anything else?
No, that was awesome, man. I think that covered quite a lot of their history there. Very eloquent there, Shane.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Shane. That
That's
was
all right.
Brilliant. Spin through the Space Wolves history and lore. I'm sure eventually we'll retouch Space Wolves and get into some more modern lore as and when.
Yeah.
Let us know what you thought about the video. Do you play Space Wolves? What do you love about them? Let us know. And what do you think about the Wolves on Fenris? Let's keep that debate going for Glenn's entertainment, if nothing else. So, as always, sorry?
I love a crazy theory. The weirder, the better.
Yeah, and if you've got any others, let us know. Maybe we'll bring them up. But we will wrap up. Say goodbye. Thank you very much for watching this video or listening to us. Do check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and all those other social media places you can find us. Please like, share, subscribe to this video, and thanks for listening along on a podcast version. There's a lot of these that I have to go through every episode, but we'll get through it. Quickly, Twitch combat cards, get on there, especially combat cards. As I've said the other day, please, we need to take Glenn and Shane out of this game because look at their little smug faces. Look at them. Just look at them. And then if you want to help us out on the channel, we do have a Patreon, and also the best way to support us as well would be on there, or Element Games. No extra cost to yourself. Go get your discounted hobby equipment, use our code, and it'll throw a little bit of money back to us. No extra expense to you. And hopefully we can start doing a little bit more on our channel. And unless anyone's got anything else they want to add, or howl, Tom, you got another howl in you for us?
No, it's your turn to howl.
Is it? So we'll. I'm going to cut that out because I'll put it in. So we'll exterminate us there because the howl that I did wasn't good enough for Tom, and you're not going to see it. So see you later.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
As always, we would like to thank you for listening to our Iron and Ceramite podcast. If you liked us, then you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and any other good podcast services. Just remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
Lead us in.
I thought you was going to sit there silently because you didn't want to.
No. I'm sitting there just going, like, who's kicking this off?
Yeah. No, I thought it was recorded. All right, cool. I'll kick it off. And unless anyone's got anything else they want to add, or howl, Tom, you got another howl in you for us?
No, it's your turn to howl.
Is it?
Yeah.
Exterminators, howl!
That's not a howl. Is that a howl?
Well, I had to get it in.
You just sound like a really camp bloke in the middle of a dance floor.
That's not very nice. So we'll. I'm going to cut that out because I don't put it in. So we'll exterminate us there because the howl that I did wasn't good enough for Tom, and you're not going to see it. So see you later.
See you later, guys.
Bye.